Hey guys, Lauren Howman, and I'm coming to you from my office. I'm on my lunch break right now, and so I wanted to go over some interesting items that I learned about this morning about hormones of hunger hormones. So first, let's get the disclaimer out of the way. I'm Lauren Howman. I'm a nurse practitioner, but I'm not operating as such during this fasting journey. So thank you for watching, but please get in touch with your own provider or practitioner before starting any fasting journey or before starting a new diet or exercise routine. Bing. All right, so leptin and ghrelin, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Today is, what is today? Thursday, and I ate last night. I already told you what I ate. It was like a vegan patty and some lima beans, and that's what I had for dinner. And I don't think I'm going to eat tonight because I get off work late tonight around 7 o'clock, and by the time I get home it's time to put the kids to bed, and then it's really bedtime for me an hour later, so I can just go without eating tonight. And tomorrow I have a picnic to go to, so I'm just going to fast tonight and then eat tomorrow. And tomorrow probably will not be a low carb picnic, so I will probably just eat what's there. And by fasting tonight, I'll be doing myself a favor for eating that food tomorrow. So that's what I'll do there. And so anyway, let's talk about leptin and ghrelin. So these are two hormones that have an impact on hunger and appetite control. So they're not the only two, but they're two important ones that get off balanced. So with leptin is produced by your adipose tissue, your fat tissue, and the more fat you have, the more leptin is produced. And leptin's job is to tell your brain that you are no longer hungry, that you are well fed, and that you do not need to eat anymore. On the opposite end of the spectrum is ghrelin. Ghrelin is produced in the stomach, and it's produced when the stomach is empty. When the stomach is empty, ghrelin production goes up and it tells you that you're hungry, and that basically initiates the eating process or the hunger feeling of like, I need to eat now. So basically, if all things were in happy harmony, you would have the leptin telling you to stop eating and the ghrelin telling you when to start eating, and you would just be thin, trim, and doing well. They're supposed to live in happy harmony. It's like your body's thermostat for fat retention or whatever, so that, you know, when you have the right amount of fat on your body, you're supposed to not eat as much. And when you don't have enough fat on your body, your thermostat says, let's produce some ghrelin and get this person to start eating. So number one, ghrelin is that hormone that makes you hungry when you start fasting and you have an empty belly. But if you wait long enough, if you wait an hour or so, ghrelin, you know how they say hunger comes in waves? That's because ghrelin is increased, but it doesn't stay increased. It doesn't just keep pumping out the ghrelin until you decide to eat something. It pumps it out, it lets you know, hey, it's time to eat. And if you don't eat, after an hour or so, it goes away. And with people who are used to eating the standard American diet, which is 3 meals a day and 3 snacks a day and whatever else in between, your ghrelin, there's been studies that show in fasting people that the ghrelin actually will increase during the times that you are accustomed to eating. So at breakfast time, lunchtime, dinner time, and maybe some of the snack times. But in people who are obese, anybody watching these videos is probably in that category, or at least overweight, or used to be in those categories, but has corrected it with some method. For those of us who are obese, we have an imbalance of those hormones, of the leptin and the ghrelin hormones. So the hormone of leptin is the one that tells your body you are done eating. But as we're sitting here obese, we have to wonder, is our leptin not working? That is the truth. It's not working effectively because we have become insulin resistant, which I talk about in other videos. And also, as we become insulin resistant, we also become leptin resistant. So our leptin is increased. We've got all these fat cells producing leptin, telling us that we're trying to tell the brain that we're not hungry, that we don't need to eat. But we are leptin resistant, which means that we don't listen to those signals effectively, and so we continue to eat. So basically, let me look at my notes for a second here. I took a couple notes on this. There are ways to increase your leptin sensitivity, and one of those is to sleep more. When we don't sleep, leptin gets messed up, and that drops our leptin levels, which means that we're not going to have that signal to the brain saying, don't eat, you're fine. And ghrelin levels also increase when we have poor sleep. So I think a lot of us can kind of relate to the fact that when you sleep terribly, you get hungrier. My husband is a perfect example of that. Every baby we've brought home from the hospital, he's gained weight because he doesn't sleep, because we've got a new baby in the house, and you know, I'm nursing baby in bed and doing all of this, and he's not getting good sleep, and then he is hungry all the time and he eats a lot more. So I've seen that in action, and I think all of us know that when we don't sleep well, we get hungrier. So both of the hormones are supposed to respond to how well fed we are. So when we are don't have enough fat on our body, we are supposed to feel hungry, and ghrelin is produced to tell us to eat. And when we have enough fat stored on our body, or we've taken in enough calories, leptin is increased in our body, and that's supposed to tell us to stop eating. But they are both messed up with obesity. So if you are obese, you have leptin insensitivity or leptin resistance. And let's see where I'm at on here. So basically, when you're fasting, this is just a side point that has to do with ghrelin. When you're fasting and you start feeling hungry, like I said before, you get those spikes around lunch and dinner and all the times that you're accustomed to eating, and you give in, your hormones are working against you initially because it's spiking because you usually eat at that time. So it's spiking because it's accustomed to getting food at that time. If you wait it out, you will get past the hump and you will feel better again because your ghrelin will decrease again. But so it's really hard to say I've got willpower when you've got hormones working against you. But if we can get those hormones rechecked, get them back in balance, we would be doing much better. So with extending fasting, the ghrelin initially will increase because, again, it's going to tell you my stomach is empty, let's feed me. And you'll get those periods where you feel like you're starving because your hormones are telling you to eat. But then gradually at like 48 hours, your hunger is going to disappear because your ghrelin just drops off. That hormone that's telling you to eat, it just drops. And that's why people, when they extended fast for like any time past 48 hours, tell you the hunger just disappears, which is a really cool thing. And by fasting, you're going to correct the imbalances that you have with your leptin and your ghrelin and your leptin, and you're going to become more sensitive to your leptin, and also you're going to get your ghrelin in check. So, what's my stomach? I don't know if you can hear that on YouTube, but my stomach just growled because I'm talking about it. So ghrelin rises at meal times, but it does go away. And when you are fasting, here's one advantage for women. Now, we never get advantages when it comes to weight loss, but with women, our ghrelin decreases a lot faster than men. So a lot of times women actually have an easier time fasting than men for extended periods, which is kind of cool. Like, kudos to the body for doing something for us that's different than the men, because it seems like the men can drop the weight so easily and we have a hard time. So the way these hormones are supposed to work is you're supposed to you eat something, you get a high insulin level, you gain fat. That's what insulin does. You gain fat, your leptin increases, which tells your body to stop eating, and then your appetite gets decreased because the leptin was produced and it told you to stop eating, and your appetite is now decreased, which will also in turn decrease your insulin because you're not eating anymore. But what happens when you become leptin and insulin resistant is that you eat something, you put the fat on, you get the calories in, you gain the fat, your leptin goes up, your body doesn't respond to it because it's not listening to the leptin anymore. You now have leptin resistance, and then your insulin stays higher because you eat more. You don't get that satiety of the leptin saying, we're done, we're good, we're full. And so that's what happens, and it creates a vicious cycle of you overeating, me overeating, because we're never being told to cut off. So I think there's a lot of good value in, like, what your grandma used to tell you, or whoever used to tell you. I don't know, I heard it so many times in my life, that after you eat a meal, if you're still feeling hungry, wait 20 or 30 minutes and see what happens, because if you wait long enough, you will realize that you're full. But we eat so fast in America, like, we're forced to eat so fast, and we eat while multitasking and doing computer work and doing all these other things, watching TV, that we're just missing these signals. But leptin battles insulin. So leptin is losing a fight against insulin if you're insulin resistant and if you're obese. So your leptin is saying, hey, stop eating, stop eating, stop eating. And the insulin is counteracting that and silencing it. And so we always have high insulin, and leptin has like no fighting chance at telling us to stop eating. So what is the fix? This is a lot of science today, I'm sorry. I get excited about science, and I do have to look at my notes because this is new to me. Somebody mentioned leptin to me a while back, and I meant to look into it, and I never got a chance to because my brain goes in 50 different directions at one time. If you know me and you've listened to my YouTubes, you know that things go off in every direction, and I try to bring it back centrally. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the fix for this hormone imbalance is fasting. So even with an intermittent fast, you can do this, and with long-term fasting too, like the 24 and the 48s and the 72-hour fast. But when you lower your insulin levels, which means you're not eating, insulin is produced in response to food coming in. If you're not eating, you lower your insulin levels, so you're now fasting, and then your leptin wins the battle against the insulin, and you get less hungry because your body is finally able to listen to the leptin. And I am super simplifying this for you because this is how it makes most sense to me, and I think it's going to be easier if we keep this like on a low level instead of getting like super like I could bust out a chart and have to point to 80 different directions with these hormones, but you're going to get the essential idea behind what I'm saying. So leptin gets to win the battle against insulin because insulin's not so darn high because of all the food that you've eaten, you're fasting, and then your leptin sensitivity increases, you're no longer resistant, so you are able to take the signals from the leptin and stop eating when you're supposed to stop eating, and it suppresses your appetite. In my fasting journey, the one cool thing that I've found that relates to leptin and ghrelin is that I have essentially figured out when I'm actually hungry and when my stomach's just growling. A lot of people think the two are the same, and they're totally not. One is the ghrelin, and it's a little bit of air and gas. And one is true hunger, which is very rare in a person who is overweight. You'd have to fast for 5 or 6 days to even feel the effects of like a real hunger. And I felt that a few times. I've done a few extended fastings, but it's really cool to be able to tell the difference between the two and no, you're not hungry, Lauren, you just want to eat. And there's a lot of differences there. But I've also become a lot less likely to overeat when I do eat because number one, it feels uncomfortable, but number two, I'm more leptin sensitive. I'm also more insulin sensitive, but my leptin is working better for me. And so when I eat, I get full faster. So I may make a huge meal, but I almost never finish it anymore. Like last night I had a vegan beef patty type frozen thing. Not that great, but I put a piece of cheese on it and mustard on it, and that actually made it really good. And I have a big bowl of lima beans, which I love lima beans, but I ate maybe half of the lima beans and the whole patty, and I was stuffed. And normally, prior to my fasting journey, I would have easily taken out both of those items and then still wanted something sweet, but I was completely happy to be done with eating. And actually I had a couple yellow peppers too, couple of pieces of yellow pepper raw that I had cut up, and because the pepper was about to go bad, so I went ahead and ate that. But in my fasting journey, I've actually been able to learn the difference between the two, and I think that's really cool. If you ever get to that point where you can tell the difference between hunger and eating for boredom or eating because it's a ritual or your body's accustomed to eating at a certain time every day, that's a really cool thing to have happen. And it gives you a little bit of freedom and liberty from food. It unchains you from food, and you can kind of start doing your own thing and feel kind of liberated and just kind of free of the food addiction. Now on that front, this really doesn't have anything to do with leptin and ghrelin, but you got to get past your food addiction. And I've talked about this in previous videos. So when you're doing your refeeds and we're trying to get you to lose weight and you're fasting and you're doing whatever schedule you're doing, do not pick the yummiest foods that you can find in the universe, your favorite foods, because they will, food is an addiction. And sugar is actually 6 or 7 times more addictive than crack cocaine. So if you're finding the best foods to eat, like the most yummy, tastiest things on earth, you're gonna trigger your addiction hormones. I can't think anymore today. You're gonna go ahead and you're gonna have that pleasure center unlocked with that food, and it's going to make it very hard to stop eating. So I've talked about this before. One girl did refeeds on only pickles and hot peppers. I'm not doing that, but I did get rid of some of the triggering foods for myself, which is avocado, mixed nuts. I try to stay away from those two things because they do trigger me to overeat, because I just love that healthy fat. And so to reset your hormones, you basically need to fast. That is the moral of the story. And through fasting, you're going to decrease your insulin resistance, you're going to decrease your leptin resistance, and you're going to get your levels of leptin and ghrelin working in harmony instead of working all wonky together, and you're going to be able to pick up on those signals better. So I hope all that makes sense. So one of my fasters texted me today right before I came on this video and said, I'm at 21.5 hours, but I'm starving to death. And she usually does okay. She does like intermittent fasting with like OMAD or like a 2-3 hour window. And she's like, I don't think I'm gonna make it to 24 hours. I said, give it an hour, go do something, give it an hour. And when you get back, if you're still hungry, then eat. And if you're not, then move on, because it does come in waves. And if you wait a little bit and take your mind off of it, it'll go away. So then she came back an hour later and she said, I'm good. I'll go ahead and make it through the 24 hours now, and then I'll eat. But So there is a little bit of willpower and there is a little bit of discipline involved with fasting, because there are going to be times when your stomach just hollers at you. Mine doesn't do it often anymore, but it just did it a minute ago, and I don't know if that's because we were talking about ghrelin or it just my stomach thought this was an appropriate time to make noise. But that's all I've got for you today. So I'm not going to eat tonight. I'm going to fast till tomorrow, and then I have a picnic to go to at 11:30, so I'll be there and I'll be eating. And then I don't know what I'll do for the weekend yet, but I'll at least do OMAD, if not longer fast than that. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Hope everybody has a good day.